Now obviously we can't glass the whole board in one go as we don't have access to whichever side is facing down. So what we need to work out ahead of time is what we're going to do for the lap. And the lap is how the fiberglass cloth from the top overlaps the cloth of the bottom, or vice versa. Now there's two main styles of lap. First is the half lap, where the cloth drapes over the rail and it kind of comes down about halfway. Then the two layers will meet in the middle of the rail and you have a fairly easy time with blending that in. Now the other method is going to be the full lap, and that is when the cloth wraps all the way around and hits the other side of the board, and that effectively doubles up the thickness of the cloth on the rails, and I quite like that because it gives it a little bit of extra strength in those areas which are going to be more likely to get hit up against rocks, roof racks, or what have you. So now we're going to be doing a full lap today, so we just need a mask for that. Now when you're fiberglassing a board, it happens in several stages. Typically you'll glass the bottom first, then the top for laminating the cloth on. Then you do the reverse order for the fill coats or the hot coats. So you do top, then bottom. So let's start by masking out our lap. Now as we do the bottom side first, we've got the top of the board facing up because this is what our rail is going to wrap onto. Now I like to come in a little bit from the rail, about an inch. And that just gives us a good amount of area to overlap and double up our cloth while not being too heavy. You can come in on more than this or less, but this is what I find works well for me. So I'm just going to eyeball it for this stage and put tape all the way around. Now I found this packing tape to work really well for this because the resin actually doesn't stick to it, where with the masking tape that I used to use, it could actually soak through and make it hard to remove. Now to give some extra security from getting resin on our sanded surface, I'm also going to mask off most of the deck with some of this thin paper, but newspaper or whatever scraps would work really well. All right, so with that all masked off, we should be safe from getting anything on our sanded surfaces. So we can flip our board around and start laying out the cloth. Now when handling cloth, it is a good idea to have gloves on because you don't want any oils or anything like that that might be on your skin to get onto the cloth, as that could affect the finished product. But here we just start laying it out and making sure that it is pretty much centered on the board with the width. We will trim off the excess, but make sure it's close. Once your cloth is laid over your board, start working from the middle out, patting it down so it's nice and smooth. Just use light pressure here. You don't want to use too much because you could pull the cloth off that way. Here you can see I'm just patting it out so it sits nice and flat on the surface. This includes working down the rails to make sure that where it's going to lay over is nice and smooth. Now, with a sharp pair of scissors, we're going to trim off the overhang, but we need to make sure that we are going to have enough material to tuck all the way over the edge and land on our masked off area. So in this case, where we're hanging down here should be enough. So we're going to look for about, that would be about 80 mil or 3.5 inches worth of overhang. Each board will be different. If you have a thicker rail, you're obviously going to be a bit thicker than 80. So make sure you do check this and not just commit and cut things away. Now up at the nose and the tail, we need to do some relief cuts so when we wrap the cloth around, we don't end up with this buckle. So the way I do this is I wrap it and I fold a crease in to the cloth. Then I do a cut along that crease until it hits the point. And I do a second crease to where it should be laying nice and flat. And I cut along there. I do that on both sides. And now when I tuck this up and under, we're going to end up with a really nice crisp edge. On rounded noses and tails, you might need to do multiple cuts along the radius to make sure as it folds under, it doesn't crease. Now I've got you pointed at the tail now, and what we're going to do is the same relief cuts, except this time we've got a squared tail instead. So it's going to be a few more cuts. So I fold that under and cut in with our crease. Now here, I can see where I'm not going to need any cloth. And I cut to those creases. That folded under, we can see we'll get a nice crisp corner. Now if you get any of these fairy bits here, just make sure you come back and trim them off. And this is where sharp scissors are important, because the cleaner these lines are, the less likely you are going to pull a strand out when you're trying to wrap this around the tail or nose or rail or wherever.